My question to you, though, is do you think America is safer because President Trump issued these pardons to 1,600 of these criminal defendants, many of whom violently assaulted our police in the Capitol?
Senator, America will be safe when we don't have 200,000 drug overdoses in 2 years. America will be safe when we don't have 50 homicides in a day.
So you just won't answer the question.
I'm going to say,
I don't think we're safer. Matthew Huddle was sent back to Indiana. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I woke up this morning to National Public Radio, and they had an item on there about what has happened to those who were given blanket clemency by President Trump. One of these individuals was a man named Matthew Huddle. Are you familiar with him?
I'm sorry, what was the last name?
Matthew Huddle.
If you could remind me, Senator.
Well, I was reminded again this morning. He's a man who's been found guilty of numerous crimes. The one described this morning was an outrageous situation where he beat his 3-year-old child to a point where the poor kid couldn't even sit down for a week. Mr. Huddle was one of the demonstrators who came to the Capitol on January 6th. He was incarcerated and charged with, and pled guilty to crimes that he had committed, violence against police officers. After he was released by President Trump, he returned to his home state of Indiana. A few days later, he was stopped on the road, pulled a gun on a policeman. The policeman, sheriff's deputy, turned, shot, and killed him. This is not the only instance of a person who received President Trump's clemency committing another crime. Peter Schwartz was mentioned this morning on the radio. 38 criminal convictions, 38. He'd been sentenced to 14 years in prison. He was released because of the president's unconditional clemency, which was given to him as well. So I guess my question is this. Was President Donald Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to the January 6 defendants?
Thank you, Ranking Member. A couple of things on that. One, the power of the presidential pardon is just that, the president.
Well, I concede he has the authority. I'm asking, was he wrong to do it?
And as we discussed in our private meeting, Senator, I have always rejected any violence against law enforcement, and I have, including in that group, is specifically addressed any violence against law enforcement on January 6th, and I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
So do you think that America is safer because these 1,600 people have been given an opportunity to come out of serving their sentences and live in our communities again?
Senator, I have not looked at all 1,600 individual cases. I have always advocated for imprisoning those that cause harm to our law enforcement and civilian communities. I also believe America is not safer because President Biden's commutation of a man who murdered 2 FBI agents, Agent Kohler's and Williams' family, deserve better than to have the man that point blank range fired a shotgun into their heads and murdered them released from prison. So it goes both ways.
Leonard Pelletier was in prison for 45 years. He's 80 years old, and he was sentenced to home confinement. So he's not free, as you might have just suggested.
He killed 2 FBI agents.
That's true, he did, and he went to prison for it and should have. My question to you, though, is do you think America is safer because President Trump issued these pardons to 1,600 of these criminal defendants, many of whom violently assaulted our police in the Capitol?
Senator, America will be safe when we don't have 200,000 drug overdoses in 2 years. America will be safe when we don't have 50 homicides in a day.
So you just won't answer the question. I'm going to say I don't think we're safer. Matthew Huddle was sent back to Indiana. I don't think we're safer with Peter Schwartz. I could go through a long list of individuals, some of who were wanted in states, members of this committee. Let me move to another topic if I can. Tell me about your J6 choir. What is that?
Well, it's not my choir. It's simply a recording that was utilized to raise funds for families in need of nonviolent offenders.
Who sings on this recording?
I don't know, Senator.
What did you have to do with it?
Simply to raise funds to assist families of nonviolent offenders whose kids needed college education payments and whose rent needed being paid.
My understanding is that the performers on this J6 choir were the rioters who are in prison.
I'm not aware of that, sir. I didn't have anything to do with the recording.
You weren't aware of who made the recording?
No, Senator.
That's interesting. Did you receive any money for selling copies of that music or that recording?
Absolutely not.
Okay. You do have a foundation, though, do you not?
I'm very proud of the Kash Foundation and the $1.3 million we've given to families in need across this country, including active duty service members, police officers, putting kids in college, and helping people in disaster relief areas rebuild their homes and their communities.
1&0 LLC, are you familiar with that?
Sorry?
1&0 LLC?
I believe, Senator, you're referring to the LLC that one of the individuals has his private business with.
Is it part of the Kash Foundation in any way?
Only in that one of the members of the board has that LLC for his outside business.
Andrew Allis?
I believe that's his name, yes.
Yes. Do you know how much was paid to him from your charitable work?
Yes, like any other charity, we had to go out and fundraise, something I'm sure every member of this committee is familiar with. And we used digital marketing campaigns, and I believe we paid a digital marketing company through 1&0 $250,000 to raise $500,000, which we gave away to families in need, like when hurricanes struck Florida, Texas, and North Carolina.
We will be going through the details of your foundation and the expenditures with the questions for record that the chairman has mentioned.
I look forward to
a chance to answer those under oath. Mr. Patel, you frequently associated with and sometimes praised extremist figures with well-documented histories of racism, anti-Semitism, conspiracies, and the like. In September of 2023, you appeared with Laura Loomer at an event promoting your book, this one here. You shared a photo of yourself and Loomer in which you held her book and she held yours. Just a few months before this event, Ms. Loomer posted on X that the September 11 terrorist attacks were, quote, an inside job. Around that time, she accused Florida's First Lady, Casey DeSantis, of exaggerating her cancer diagnosis to gain voter sympathy. A number of my Republican colleagues on this committee have criticized Ms. Loomer's extremism. One of my colleagues described her as a, quote, crazy conspiracy theorist who regularly utters disgusting garbage. Another called her really toxic. Given all of this, why did you associate with Ms. Loomer?
Senator, as you can see, I took a photograph with an individual who showed up at a book event. I don't believe I'm guilty by association, and I certainly don't believe that an individual who was the first minority to serve as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for this country is a racist in any way, and I detest any conjecture to the contrary.
You familiar with a Stu Peters? Does that name ring a bell?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you familiar with Mr. Stu Peters?
Not off the top of my head.
He made 8 separate appearances on his podcast. He promoted outrageous conspiracy theories and worked with a prominent neo-Nazi. There are more, Ted Nugent, it goes on, list goes on. I'm just asking, when it comes to your association with individuals, why are so many of them in this category?
My association, as you loosely define it, is by appearing in media over 1,000 times to take on people who are putting on conspiratorial theories and to devour them of their false impressions and to talk to them about the truth. That is something that I will always continue to fight for, Senator.
What you just watched wasn't a technical briefing. It was a moral and institutional stress test. When Senator Dick Durbin pressed Kash Patel about the after effects of President Trump's blanket clemency for many January 6 defendants, he was forcing a very basic question onto the table. What happens to public safety, justice, and the rule of law when mercy looks selective, political, or unaccountable? Durbin didn't speak in hypotheticals. He named people whose stories read like a nightmare version of what if. Men convicted of violent acts at the Capitol, pardoned or commuted, returning to their communities, and, in at least one reported case, committing another violent act so soon after release that a deputy shot and killed him. That example is not merely a debating point. It's a real family's disaster and a community's trauma. It's also the clearest, grimmest evidence for why people ask whether blanket clemency was prudent or reckless. There are 3 layers to why this matters beyond the headlines. The first is legal mechanics. The president has plenary clemency power. That's old constitutional law. But legal power is not the same as moral or prudential wisdom. Pardons and commutations can correct injustice, heal wounds, and protect lives. Or they can be used to reward loyalty and narrow politics. The difference lies in how the power is exercised. Is there a transparent, case-by-case process based on public safety and remorse? Or is it a broad stroke that shields a political constituency? Durbin's questioning is blunt because the public wants to know which of those 2 things we got. The second layer is institutional trust. Law enforcement and prosecutors depend on the idea that rules will be enforced fairly. When that trust frays, cooperation dissolves. Witnesses stop stepping forward. Juries become skeptical. Police morale drops. Imagine policing in a place where people believe enforcement favors political allies. The result is not merely fury at elites. It's less effective, less legitimate public safety. Durbin's examples, the repeat violent offender, the career criminals suddenly released, are powerful because they make the abstract risk of eroded trust visceral and immediate. The third layer is the politics of symbolism. Clemency decisions are statements about who counts as a wrongdoer and who counts as a political actor. Presidential pardons have long been sticky political flashpoints. Think Gerald Ford's pardon of Nixon or Clinton's pardon list controversies. But using clemency en masse for people who stormed the Capitol, in a context where many of those people assaulted officers or engaged in violence, sends a message. For victims and for the officers who defended the Capitol, it can feel like a statement that their suffering is negotiable. For observers across the political spectrum, it raises the question, are we applying justice consistently, or is the system being bent to protect a political movement? Durbin also pushed on Patel about the so-called J6 choir and the fundraising tied to it. That touches on a different but connected problem, how public figures relate to movements and how they profit or appear to profit from them. If a public official's foundation solicits funds and channels them through companies with board members who benefit, even if legal, the optics matter. Inquiries about whether funds went to digital marketing firms linked to board members are not petty bookkeeping. They're essential checks that citizens have a right to see. When charities intersect with political causes, transparency is the only antidote to suspicion. Another thread Durbin pulled at was association and amplification. Patel's comfort with appearing alongside or photographed with extremist personalities is not merely a PR gaffe. When officials platform voices that traffic in conspiracy, racism, or anti-Semitism, the platforming normalizes those views. Over time, what was fringe can bleed into policy debates because it receives the legitimacy that comes from proximity to public power. That's why senators drill into associations, not to police social life, but to test judgment and the potential to legitimize dangerous rhetoric. So what would responsible answers look like? For starters, a clear case-by-case accounting of clemency decisions with rationales tied to public safety assessments would go a long way. Independent review, whether by an inspector general, the pardon attorney's office, or a bipartisan congressional committee, could examine how criteria were applied. For charity and foundation issues, simple transparency, public financial disclosures, conflict of interest policies, and audits would prevent suspicion from metastasizing into cynicism. And for associations with extremist figures, a textured standard. Explain when engagement is intended to rebut harmful claims versus when it gives unwanted legitimacy. None of this will magically erase the polarizations that make these hearings so raw, but addressing the practical implications, how pardons are vetted, how funds are spent, how officials manage public associations, is how institutions rebuild credibility. The alternative is a slow erosion, more hearings, more headlines, and a deeper public sense that accountability is conditional, not universal. If you care about the future of accountable government, it matters what happens next. Ask your representatives to push for public explanations of clemency criteria and for audits of charitable spending tied to political causes. Demand that review processes exist for pardon decisions that implicate public safety, and insist on transparency about any ties between public officials and extremist influencers. Vote and speak up. Institutional trust is not rebuilt by indifference. If this discussion matters to you, tell us what you think in the comments. Which reform would you prioritize? Transparent clemency criteria, independent reviews, stricter nonprofit auditing, or clearer standards around associations? And if you want more breakdowns that move beyond the headlines and explain what these hearings mean for real people, subscribe and stay engaged. Democracy depends on citizens who are informed enough to demand better.